Hi guys, Eric here with Graybeard Gardening PDX out of Portland, Oregon. Today is Sunday, June 28th, and I'm getting ready to do a video showing you guys my approach to different types of tomatoes and how to prune those. I have several different types of tomatoes in my garden, and I have over 40 tomato plants this year in my backyard. So I will show you my approach to each of these types of plants. I take a different approach to each type of plant based on what I've seen out of its growth in the past. This right next to me is an Amish paste patch, and I have 18 Amish paste tomatoes here. I believe I have 10 Burpee Amish paste and 8 Baker Creek Amish paste. So I'm running kind of a test between the two. Both of them are very similar in structure. I selected them because they seem to be legitimate Amish pastes. And as I got into it, they are legitimate. These are growing exactly the way I expect. But let's go ahead and get into it here, and I'll tell you a little bit more about these Amish pastes, and then we'll tell you about some San Marzanos that I'm growing and how I'm approaching pruning for them. We've got a brandy wine, we've got brandy boys, we have better boys, we have a black crim, we have super sweet 100s, and we also have sun golds. Oh, and we have 2 Romas out front too that I almost forgot. We're going to give you a little taste about how we go about it here at Graybeard Gardening and show you kind of our approach to what we're doing here with our tomatoes. Hope you like it. Okay, now you're seeing another trough here, and still the Amish paste. We've got one of the main stems right here, and I don't know if you can see it through the foliage here, but here's that split that I'm talking about right here. You can see this must have been the sucker, and then this was the main stem that curled out. So you can see how weird the growth is on these a little bit. Up top, I have one good sucker up here. Again, my approach is to leave one sucker up top just in case anything goes terminal, because I have had it happen before, and it's really tough to have a plant go terminal when you have taken all the rest of the suckers off of it. So I don't know if you guys can see it right up close in here, but right in there, we have a sucker down here and a sucker right here forming. We're just gonna take those right off. Since we identified that top one up there is still intact, I'm going to leave that until we see another good sucker growing up here, then we'll take that off. Looking at this main stem here that curled off to the side, you can see that I have taken off all the suckers. Here's one of the suckers that got removed right here. Oh, let's get that. Here's one of the suckers that got removed right here. And we also removed a sucker right here. We've got another one forming right here that we're just going to pull off. And up top here, you can see that we have one sucker there and one sucker here. Sorry, that's not a great look there. One sucker there. So now that this sucker has formed up top, I can go ahead and just take this one off, snap it right off. That gives me one emergency sucker just in case that plant goes terminal at the top. And then we had one other sucker over here that we're just going to pull right off. So that there, now we've got our 2 main stems like we've talked about. Both of them have one sucker at the top. And now I found another issue while I was looking. So now we've got this plant here. You see the sucker up here that is indicating that we've got one good one there for emergencies. On the other side of it here, we've got another sucker. So I'm just going to pull that off. That was really young, but that way we've got one sucker in case of emergency. The other sucker is gone. And I started this strategy when I had let's see, it was a San Marzano a couple years back that I was aggressively pruning it, taking any suckers that I saw off immediately, and just really going at it aggressively every single time I saw a sucker. In fact, I see one over here. But then all of a sudden, the main stem, because it was a single leader going straight up, and the main stem actually terminated, and it bore some fruit, and then it just stopped. And I'm sure if you guys have grown enough tomatoes, you've seen this before, but it was an emergency because that tomato was about to become something totally obsolete without any fruit on it. But I did find a couple young suckers down the plant that, and then I had to allow those to grow in and become the two main leaders after the first main leader died out, essentially. But we did get lucky with that one, and there were more. But that changed the way that I prune. I don't prune so aggressively, so quick. I try to leave the plant a little bit of an emergency exit, if you will. Okay, guys. We're down in that same plant, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about down here. So you can see how this plant just came up and had essentially split right here. We know that's the sucker because that branch or leaf came off right there at that knuckle. You can tell this is the main stem because that did not come out until it moved out. So I'm thinking this is the main stem, this is the sucker that developed. But again, that's the way almost all of these plants develop. Almost every single one of these has the second split that is almost equal to the first leader. So right now what we're going to do is take off some of these lower leaves to give it a little better airflow down here. And it also makes it easier for us to water too. I'm going to take off this one down here. Oh, and let's see, we got one more down here I'm going to take off. And what we're seeing back here too, guys, we're seeing a little bit of blossom end rot on that one right there. So we're just going to pop that right off. Unfortunately, that is an issue with some tomatoes, but at this point we will try to figure out what's going on here. If it ends up being a massive issue through the plant, we'll take a look at how we're watering with consistency or not. Because this early in the plant and with as many nutrients as we put in here, I guarantee you that is not a lack of calcium, magnesium. It was a watering issue. But it's also fairly weird because these have been watered really properly. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But you can see what we did here. In fact, I'll take this one off just because it is really leaning down there. But you can see we cleared up a lot of airflow. So we'll see how this all develops. But that's kind of my approach to the Amish pace. I'll show you a few more examples as we move around here. Okay, guys, we're on the back side of that first Balin Country trough. We kept the camera low here since we've got a few things we need to prune off here. And let's just prune these off so maybe you can get a look at this plant. Okay, so let's pull this around, give you a little different view of what we're doing. Over here towards this sucker, you can see we've got a lot of space right here. So I allowed that sucker to go ahead and move over there from that spot instead of cutting it right off and knowing full well that it's just going to fill in that gap right here. I'll show you kind of an upshot there. So this branch here is just going to fill in this gap right here. So we're going to go ahead and support that and let it grow. But again, this is an example of that you don't need to always be pruning off every sucker. You should be taking a look at kind of the whole, like a holistic look at what you're doing, where you're growing, how it's growing, what kind of space you have left, where the gaps are in your sunlight, you know, to where you can utilize these gaps. So anytime you have a big gap like this over here, you want to kind of try to fill that in my opinion. And then again, one of the main goals with this is airflow. And I see here we've got a bunch of leaves over here kind of really getting on each other. So I'm just going to clear a few of those out. All right, that gave it a little better airflow over there. Okay, you guys can see that one. Here we go. We've got another main stem. We do have a sucker right there, but I do see another sucker forming pretty nicely up towards the top. So we are going to feel free to take out that one right there. Done and done. Then we've got one more sucker coming in lower, little tiny one. That one's done too. And then this one over here, you can see that has a sucker, but there are no other suckers really forming very well yet towards above that. So I'm going to leave that one until another one forms just to make sure that stays intact. But that's pretty much my approach to Amish paste. They're going to split into two main leaders almost all the time. And so if you just kind of play off of that, if you allow it to bush out into areas that do have sunshine that you don't have growth into yet with those suckers, then you can just maximize your yields, you know, assumably or theoretically. But that's my approach to it, is just filling the space with as much fruit-giving plant as possible and letting the plant do the rest. But that's really it. 2 liters on these, unless we see space and then we allow a third or maybe even a fourth. I'm observing and adjusting. Let's get into the Sun Gold. I have 2 Sun Golds here and I have 2 Super Sweet 100s. I've never grown the Super Sweet 100, so I don't know a thing about how those are going to form. But I do know that with cherry tomatoes, you generally don't want to cut suckers off. You want to let the suckers develop because that's just going to add to your fruit. And since the fruits are so small on cherry tomatoes, they don't have much difficulty keeping up with all of the suckers and the extra flower and fruit production. So you can go ahead and get away with allowing these to just get suckers left and right. You can see a sucker right here that's coming up, and we're just going to allow that to happen. And just making sure I got my fingers all clean from isopropyl alcohol here. But we've got suckers forming all up and down this. We're just letting them go. The only thing that we've done, if you can see towards the bottom here, is I've taken off some of the leaves underneath some of the suckers to go ahead and allow for better airflow down low. But you can see this plant has got great airflow, nothing really keeping us from producing anywhere on this plant yet. So all we're really trying to do is give it support with what we have going here. But we want to support it proper with a cage, and then we've also got our bamboo stake, and then just making sure to tie that off as it grows and give it support wherever it goes, and you're going to get a monster plant out of this. Same with the Super Sweet 100s. Any cherry tomatoes, you generally do not want to prune off suckers. Just go ahead and let it grow, and the only things that you want to prune are keeping airflow in mind, or just space. You know, if you're just feeling like it's getting a little too crowded somewhere along the plant, you might want to prune off a couple things. But beyond that, that's really it. So cherry tomatoes, you can pretty much just let those go crazy. Also, we have a bunch of beefsteaks here too, and we'll show you those real quick. So I have 2 different troughs full with beefsteak tomatoes. Okay, so right here we have our Brandywine Sudduth right here in the middle from Baker Creek. And then we also have our Better Boys right here on either side of the Brandywine. The Better Boys were recommended by my dad, and my best friend said that my dad grew the best tomatoes he had ever tasted in his life, and we think that they were Better Boys based on what we were kind of researching there. But um, basically, right now, I'm growing Better Boys for the first time in my life. I do think that they're going to be wonderful. Beefsteaks are an indeterminate tomato. And just to kind of go back, I didn't really go over this when we were talking about Amish paste, but there are a few different types of tomatoes out there. Generally, the two main types are indeterminate and determinate. These plants are indeterminate because they will grow, one main vine and will continue to grow up until life stops them, like whether it's frost or human intervention or pests. But essentially, they're going to grow, grow, grow until the season shuts them down. So that's an indeterminate tomato. As long as you don't cut off the wrong parts of an indeterminate tomato, then it's going to continue just vining and going up. It is a vine and it's meant to do that. So these are indeterminate tomatoes, so they are going to continue to grow. So we gave them all nice long 6-foot stakes that they all have to climb up. And then we also gave them all nice sturdy tomato cages. But the difference on a beefsteak indeterminate versus something like a sauce indeterminate like the Amish paste is that beefsteaks, you generally don't want to take off all the suckers. Again, most of it is going to be about airflow. And right here I can see down towards the bottom, we've got suckers coming out left and right. They're not really horribly overcrowding anything with this plant. It really is set up for success. So I'm not worried about the suckers. And I'm just going to clean up a couple of the leaves down low that are still looking pretty healthy, just to make sure that we don't have any disease pressure down low. And then as you look through the plant to see if you should prune anything, really I would be looking for leaves that are getting in the way of suckers growing and prune those off. I see a leaf back here that I'm going to prune off just because it seems to be not getting a ton of light and maybe getting in the way of the sucker getting some light. And then we've got another one right here I'm going to prune off. And that should give a little better light to that sucker. In fact, I see another leaf we can prune off down here. And mainly with these, you're going to just prune off leaves like this, or a branch, however you want to put that, but it's a leaf. And you want to prune those off when they're getting in the way of the suckers and their light, so and airflow. So that's really it. I'm going to run through this real quick here and get these fixed up. Not a whole lot to do on these. And with the brandywine setup, you want to be real careful to keep everything super clean around this plant. It is an heirloom, and so it's going to be a little more susceptible to disease pressure. You can see the leaves. These are like big old, I think they call these like potato leaf type tomatoes, but they are just big old single leaves. But airflow is looking pretty good in there. I got one leaf here that seems to be shading some things, so I'm going to take that out. All right. That one's looking pretty good. But everything's looking pretty good on that one too. And since we don't really need to worry about suckers too much, we're just really looking at it as a whole as far as airflow. I can see that might be a little bit of a problem going forward, so I'm going to clip off that leaf there, just reaching out. I'm going to clip off that leaf there, reaching out. We're in the San Marzano patch here. We've got 10 San Marzanos down the entire row. This is what I call the bricks, the brick raised bed. With our San Marzanos, we're going to allow them to just bush out a little bit more, grow a few more of the suckers than normal, and I'm just going to prune the San Marzano as it gets a little overcrowded in certain spots. So I'm just going to continually let it, and what that ought to do is slow it down from going up as fast. It'll bush out a little bit more. And last year and the year before, I had 10-foot San Marzanos by the end of the year, so some of them weren't even manageable up towards the top. So maybe this will slow that down a little bit as far as the height that we get out of it. And also, I think we're going to get more fruit. At this point, these, I don't have a whole lot of pruning to show you. That's just my approach to the San Marzanos this year. Not a ton of sucker pruning unless I feel like they're just getting in the way of the other suckers or other main branches. But yeah, other than that, I'm going to run out front to the Romas and get you a little video out there so you can see what I do there. But those are very simple too. In fact, I'll just tell you straight up here instead of showing you out on the Romas. For Romas, my approach is this. You're going to not prune those with suckers unless they're becoming overcrowded, just like the San Marzanos here. The one big difference between the Romas and the San Marzanos is that it's said that if you prune off the bottom 4 to 6 suckers at the very start of the plant, then you're going to improve your actual fruit size. So I am doing that. I've only got 2 out front. I put them out there because I had extra plants. I redid a bed out there and refurbished the soil. And so I felt like it was good enough to put some tomatoes out there. This is also my first year of planting Romas in ground. I think that the Romas, my theory this year is that the Romas were suffering in the years past in my garden because I had them in pots that may have been too small for the amount of root growth that they were seeing through the year. And so they were drinking profusely in those pots and just sipping up all the water that I could fit in there. And I think that they were running out of water faster than the plants that are in the troughs and in the beds. So now we've got 2 out front that are growing out there, and they are in the ground, and so it's a lot harder for it to run out of water in ground on that. One other change I did this year to make sure that my tomatoes had less blossom end rot is that in my soil mixture for my raised beds, I added probably 50% more compost than I had in the years past. So that I believe the compost is going to allow the soil to maintain their moisture a little bit easier than the Roots Organic just all by itself or with not as much compost. Because that Roots Organic has so much perlite in it and cocoa that it is really made for drainage and repeat feedings through the year. I'm kind of rambling. That's pretty much the show for today. I really appreciate you guys sticking on board here. I'll try to shorten it up in the editing, make sure I'm not rambling too much. But again, if you like, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe button if you haven't already. And I don't know if you guys saw, but we have a lot of tomatoes started on all these plants. So it's going to get exciting here very quickly. So thanks again for sticking with us here at Graybeard Gardening PDX, and we'll see you on the next episode.